In this little segment, what I'm going to try to do is run through sort of a hypothetical example I've come up with that I've tried to make fairly parallel to one or maybe combine two of the homework questions that I'll have you guys work on. What I have in mind is I'm looking at a change in, let's say, regulations around the coal industry. Let's say regulations are tightening on coal power. So here I have drawn the model, the market model for solar panels. Why do I have that? What's the relationship between something happening in the coal market and solar panels? By the way, if regulations are happening in the coal market, that's probably decreasing the supply of the production of coal. The leading, as I recall or last heard, the top source of U.S. energy to our electrical receptacles in our homes and businesses is still coal. But if regulations are tightening on coal, it's making it harder to extract that coal from the ground or harder to produce electricity from it. So likely the price of coal energy is rising. And here I have a model for solar panels. Of our 9 determinants, why am I talking about solar panels? What does it sound like is going on here? Well, solar panels can power the receptacles to our homes and businesses too. So these are substitutes. As coal energy gets more expensive, what is that likely to do in the market for solar panels? It's likely, I think, all else constant, to increase the demand for solar panels because the substitute is more expensive. Coal energy has become more expensive as we impose regulations on coal production or coal firing up for energy. And so that pushes up on the price and out on the quantity in the market for solar panels. So how do these firms increase this quantity supply to solar panels? By what means can they just make more? Or by what means will other firms enter to make more? Well, they must need to hire people to do that, and that's derived demand. That derives labor demand in the solar energy industry. So over here I have the labor market. You know that because I have W and L instead of a P and Q. For the solar industry, and I'm saying geographically unknown. I don't really know if there's a headquarters kind of town or state for the U.S. solar industry. I really don't know. I think it's a fairly high-skilled industry, the development of those things, and probably to a large extent the installation of solar panels, although I've only I have my own little solar panel on a cabin that I've installed. I don't know a whole lot about them, but I think it's a little bit more of a white-collar industry than coal mining in rural West Virginia, and rural West Virginia is still a hub for the coal industry in the United States. So I'm going to compare these two labor markets. So we have derived demand for the solar industry, for the labor in the solar industry because of the increased demand for solar panels, right? To make that quantity supplied happen, laborers are going to need to do that. So what we're talking about is an increase in demand for the laborers in the solar industry. And that's, again, firms are the demanders of labor, right? So you could think of it as being them having more income because price times quantity is total revenue, and these brown lines are both bigger than the green lines were. Total revenue is up in the solar panel industry. The firms have greater income. You could think of it that way. You could also think of it as the firms simply having a greater taste for laborers because of this. However you want to think about it, which I think is just fine to describe it that way. I think you can live your life just fine using just those 9 determinants for supply and demand. That's going to push up on the wages in the solar panel industry, and there'll be more people hired doing it because they can get higher wages. So people will learn that trade, or they'll come maybe out of retirement to do that, or people in similar fields will shift over to that. So the quantity supplied of laborers will rise along the supply curve to chase after those higher wages. But I wanted to put this model in here for rural West Virginia because what's also happening in rural West Virginia, which, as I said, is kind of a capital for our U.S. coal industry. Well, if we have these regulations on coal in production or in the use of coal for energy, this labor market is likely affected by having less demand for coal miners. And so that will push down on the wages of coal miners. And some coal miners, quantity of supply is likely to fall. Some coal miners will be leaving that industry. And perhaps they're somehow going to go over and work in the solar panel industry or solar industry. That's what we aren't being told in our models. We don't have that information. It probably depends on the ability to shift over in terms of human capital, the skill level that it takes to shift over to that. If this is a high-skilled job replacing low-skilled jobs, that gets pretty tough to do for those workers. So I think that parallels, I believe, two of the homework questions, and I'll go ahead and say what I'm referring to. I think that pretty well parallels something about corn-based ethanol. That's what I tried to do by referring to coal versus solar in the industry. So I think it's like that. And a little bit about 28.6. I think you should see some parallels with 28.6, which is about welders and the demand for welded products. So I hope that really sets you on your way using our 9 determinants, making sense of these. That's the intention anyway.